Now joining the One Star Recruits podcast, we have the son of a dairy farmer from outside Sacramento who grew up milking cows and harvesting crops, and then built himself into the best advocate for labor in terms of baseball players that the world has ever known. The founder and president of Boras Corporation, Mr. Scott Boras. Thanks for joining us today, Scott.
Pleasure to be with you guys.
Scott,
Welcome.
you know, we're an Orange County-based podcast, so we speak from experience when we say that there aren't many people down here who know the first thing about dairy farming, but you're one of them, so that's an interesting topic to me. And, you know, I read that when you were a teenager on the farm, you drove a tractor into a hole that you didn't see, snapped an axle, tipped it over, and knocked yourself unconscious in the process. I think your dad found you at some point passed out, but is that accurate? I know you're well known for your approach to statistical analysis, but what went wrong there? Can you give us the breakdown?
My father is somewhat of a mechanical genius. I did not inherit that gene from him. What I would do is we didn't have earpieces for transistor radios. So I would get an oversized baseball cap and I would wire in the transistor into my cap, which was prohibited by my father because he said I was preoccupied when I listened to ball games and didn't allow me to operate the machinery when I did so. Of course, the Oakland A's had just moved to the West Coast from Kansas City. So I had the Giants and the A's to listen to, which was for a guy who spends all day out in the field. This was heaven sent.
Yeah.
So I believe I'm listening to a Giant Dodger game, and my responsibility is to run a machine called a swather, where you go down the rows of the field, and this machine cuts the hay and then puts it into what they call a windrow. And then a baler comes in and picks it up and processes it into a bale, and then you haul it into the barn. So while doing all this, my father did what they call custom work, and he had all the machinery, and he would do and create and process the hay, their crops, for other farmers. So I'm in this other farmer's field doing this, and apparently he had test holes drilled for gas.
Oh, tricky.
And in the field, the crop had grown up into the test hole, which I imagine was about 5 to 10 feet deep. And the crop had grown up, so visually you could not see this. And I'm listening to the ball game and going down, and all of a sudden the wheel of the swather hits this wide hole and tips the entire machinery to its side, breaking the axle, which was quite expensive.
Yeah.
And I was knocked out. My father found me. His first reaction was he grabbed my hat, and my father had Steve Garvey forearms, and he literally crushed that transistor, which is one of the most amazing physical sights I've ever. He crushed it in his bare hands in anger, and then got around to seeing if I was all right.
No distractions, right?
Here's the question. Here's the follow-up question, Scott. Who won that game that day? The A's or the Dodgers?
Well, I actually think it was a Giant Dodger game I was listening to, and if I'm not mistaken, McCovey hit a grand slam late to beat the Dodgers.
Yeah. There it is.
Hey, it was all worth it then.
Yeah, worth it, except for years I've heard about the broken axle, believe me.
I had to bring it up. And Scott, you know, I want to stick to your upbringing for a second here, because now Forbes obviously calls you the most powerful sports agent in the world, but just so the listeners know where you started in baseball, after you left the farm, you were a walk-on player at University of Pacific in the early 1970s. And of course, Scott, we're the one-star recruits here. The biggest athletic accolade between the three of us is Stanga down here had a Division II golf scholarship offer that he turned down to go party at Arizona State. But for all our fellow one-stars out there, as a walk-on, can you confirm that you were indeed once one of us?
Well, the truth was they reported that, but I had an academic scholarship, and then they would split the athletic. And so because I had an academic scholarship, they didn't give me an athletic scholarship. So that is the reason for the walk-on part. But yeah, I had a great relationship at Pacific with coaching staff and everyone. The school was unbelievable to me because I was studying medicine and playing Division I sports. And back then in baseball, we played like 75 games a year, and
Right.
my professors were remarkable. I would take labs on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, and they would have special TAs that would give me all my chemistry and biology labs, and because I couldn't do it during the normal session, and they really bent over backwards so I could play sports and study medicine.
Makes sense. Do you think Scott, you maybe carried some of that stuff over from those professors and those coaches to your business now? I know you do some unique things even in your office with training and some interesting things with some of your players. Do you think some of those lessons from that time carried over to what you do now?
You know, you have mentors in your life, Richie, that are, I don't know how to put it. They're people that you always remember what they told you. And I remember I was in an organic chemistry lab on one weekend, and my professor, whose name was Dr. Gross, came out and watched me play. And I was in the lab teaching my TA, who was from India, while we were distilling chemicals for our lab. We were throwing corks into the garbage can, lofting them across the room. And yes, just for
taking Kobe shots.
Yeah, a little athletic entertainment, which he was rather enjoying. And the professor comes in and sees this and cautions us that if we break any of the lab equipment, it would explode and burn up the building. And so and he pulled me aside and he goes, "I'm going to say something to you. And I watched you play today, and you play very well. And I hear you're going to be a professional, but I want you to know something. Going forward, remember this. What goes on above your shoulders is going to be a lot more important to you than what goes on below." And I took that very seriously in the sense that when I was playing professional baseball, I would leave school a month early, and I would take my finals in spring training, and I would show up a month late. But the design of keeping my academic pursuits in line with my athletic pursuits was always something that was brought to my attention by that professor. And as it turned out, all the dynamic, I studied pharmacology and in today's baseball world and in athletics, all of that information, and actually with COVID, all the laboratory studies, immunology, dealing with immunologists, serologists, all of that training has really helped me give, I think, an insight to the athletes I represent, that we were able to get Zoom calls with a number of doctors and people to them so they could get better informed on whether or not they should play or not play, and consequences are going to be. So it's and with PEDs and all the medical advances, what to do, what not to do, and creating compendias for our athletes, it's been very helpful.
It's awesome. Shout out to Professor Gross too. I love that stuff. I have a couple in my life. I can think back to some moments above the head. Let's talk about the head and the body for you. This is more for our hustlers, our listeners out there. We have Scott Boras, the best agent, as Rip said. We had Dickie V on a couple weeks ago, and one of the most interesting things he talked about, I asked him about his energy, and he said he wakes up in the morning, every morning at about 5:30 a.m. His first thing is a glass of cranberry juice. What does Scott Boras do to get up in the morning, to get your mind right, to get your body right? I got a feeling you're pumping pretty early and you're going throughout the evening. Talk to our listeners and our young hustlers and business people out there about the way that you get your days going.
I love to talk to people that are in their 90s and 80s, because they give you an insight like from 40, 50, 60 on about what that next hopefully third of your life will be as you're going forward.
Yes.
And all of them talk about two things. They talk about balance, and they tell me, you want to know what the best investment you can make is? And the best investment you can make and the best return on investment you can make is live an extra 20 years. Live an extra 20 years, you'll triple your money. And so the idea of it is that, and granted, being an athlete your whole life and doing all this stuff till you're near 30 years old, you don't feel right if you don't work out. And so for me, you know, I've got I have a sport fitness institute, and I have 10 trainers on staff, but we're the only ones in sport that has that for all of our athletes.
Cool.
And so, but the unfortunate thing for me is they give me the routines too. And so I have got to follow this regimented course. They weigh me. When you're in business, you have insurance policies. I've got to go and take 2 annual physicals for the insurance policies. So you have this regimented process where you're monitored by your work peers and by insurance companies all the time. So you have to stay at it. And for me, I always start my morning with orange juice. Obviously, I drink a lot of orange juice, and but I usually spend a couple hours a day doing a variety of a lot of stretching, you know,
Nice.
a lot of aerobic, and a lot of the routines that our staff puts us through.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Scott, let's bring it over. Let's switch over a little bit more. I know when you do get home, you have a family of athletes now. You have some children that are, I'm not sure if they're all out of the house. During quarantine, a lot of our guests said some things that they're finding is in your industry, these coaches and these athletes, they're very busy and they don't have the beautiful opportunity of time, especially with their family. Now that they're finding it, they're loving every second of it. So along those same lines for you, are you guys watching baseball as a household? We're down here in Southern California. Stenga's a Giants fan. Me and Rip like the Diamondbacks. You got a household squad that you guys root for at the Boras household?
Well, all my children are grown. I have one who's in law school, and my oldest son, Shane. They all went to USC and played baseball and were drafted and got some minor league experience. And then they went back to graduate school. So it's been a routine for them. But basically, I've got 44 TVs in my house. Everywhere I go, there's a baseball game on. I watch it with great enthusiasm and interest, obviously. And our staff and everybody obviously sends me highlights each day after all of our players play. But and you're on the phone, but you're always watching. And I get 30-minute updates in my phone from we have an algorithm that gives us an update on what every one of our players is doing and when they're doing it in real time.
Wow.
So we stay very steadily involved during the course of the day as we monitor our clients and monitor the league.
It's so cool, Scott. You're kind of like the Iron Man of baseball. You have your own algorithm for your guys. That's amazing. That's actually kind of what I picture a little bit when I picture you getting your 44 TVs. That's very cool. In 2013, now another agent, Mr. Jay-Z, mentioned you in a line, which for us millennials is kind of cool. It's kind of like you made it if Jay-Z mentions you in a hip hop line. And it was over the Robinson Cano signing. 7 years later, looks like you're still the big dog, Scott. And I have a question. If you remember that song in 2013, did that come to your desk? Did that come through the algorithm and somebody let you know that Jay-Z just mentioned you in a song? Do you remember where you were when you heard that?
You know, I'm really kind of an R&B guy, and I love guys like I love R. Kelly, I love Robin Thicke, I love Luther Vandross. You're talking about many of the
guys who get the vibe right.
Yeah, where the great thing about my job is that I'm around players and their music, and I get to listen to it, and you get a full palette of what's going on in music today. So it's kind of neat. But the truth of the matter is that the Bernie Williams is a guy who his father was a musician, and Bernie has become a concert jazz guitarist after his playing career. And in my dynamic, I when they called me about it, I said, look, when Bernie Williams mentions me in a song, then I'll be most pleased. As far as Jay-Z, it doesn't really ring a bell for me, you know.
I love
There you
it.
go, Scott. Yeah, I appreciate. I think that's good. We have Wayman Tisdale is a Phoenix Sun, an ex-Phoenix Sun, and I know, rest in peace, Wayman. He was a really talented musician too, and I the guys who go jazz are very interesting to me. That Bernie Williams story, I love. I've heard that before. Even the kicker in Baltimore, Justin Tucker, the opera singer, is very interesting to me. So thank you for sharing that with us, Scott.
Happy to.
Absolutely. Scott, you got Stanga here, and question for you. We both made the change from Northern California to Southern California. I never knew of this beautiful plot of land until about 10 years ago. I found myself in a sauna with another gentleman. He owned about 200 banks throughout the United States. And I was curious, you know, so I was like, what's the best city to live in? He didn't even blink. He goes, Newport Beach. And I knew I would end up there as soon as he said it. It's the best plot of land in the world. Did you have a similar sauna experience that I did that made you end up in God's country?
Well, let me first of all give you some legal advice. In today's world, if you are in a sauna, I would not tell anybody that anyone with you.
Oh, it stays in the sauna. We didn't know that.
I just got legal advice from Scott Boras, so my day is done.
As far as Newport Beach, it's like people ask me what it's like, and I said it is a no thermometer zone, because you always know it's going to be 65 in the morning and 82 in the afternoon, and that's about it. You're going to get an ocean breeze, and it is climate control beyond merit for the year. I've been many places, but I've never been anywhere where the weather is like this. It's really remarkable. And I do enjoy the seasons, and my father has a ranch up there. And so when he's still not mad at me for breaking his axle, I go up there and see him regularly. So I get a little Northern California weather to remind me of home life, you know.
I do the same thing. I love that. And again, Rick mentioned earlier, I'm in real estate, so we're both deal makers at heart. In fact, some actually call me a homeless man, Scott Boras, in the real estate market. But we have guests on the pod that are current and past athletes, coaches. They all talk about SoCal, but they're like, the weather's beautiful, but home prices are so expensive. So what would you say to an athlete who signed a big deal in Anaheim, and he's like, am I trying to buy or should I rent a home, Scott? What would you tell?
That's a good question.
We've actually modeled this down, and there are about 13 jurisdictions of the 30 in baseball where it's good to buy homes because they'll appreciate over a 4 to 7 year period.
Wow.
And there are about 5 or 6 where normally the appreciation levels are not that great. And then there are about 10 or so where it really, unless you're there for the long term, buying a home may not be the most fruitful process for your portfolio. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll edit that part out there, Scott,
Okay.
because
Southern California actually is a place where it's very beneficial to buy homes if you're here on a long-term basis.
Bang, we're back, Scott. We're back to business.
We're back.
I got one final question for you. I'm actually personally starting my own team here at the Stanga Group, so I'm starting to hire. It's in the middle of a pandemic, so I've got a lot of free agents out there. I feel like my pickings are pretty good. But what advice would you have for me or anyone in the small business game that's a one-man shop, and we're about 35, we're getting it going. We're going to start hiring out college, 25, 30-year-old gunners. And what advice would you have for someone like me in the game?
Well, I think the first thing is you only want to look at an academic resume to make sure they're intellectually of the measure that you would expect someone you'd hire to be. Okay. But the real test for me is passion. Is that someone has to be, the great thing about my job is that I don't represent buildings, I don't represent corporations, I represent people that I understand and relate to, and that's baseball players. And when you've been a professional baseball player and you put on your uniform and you go out there and play, and you have the ups and downs, and you deal with having to do well at particular times, you have that pressure on you. And it's why we have psychologists on our staff, and we know how to talk to players and what to do. But when a player has passion, is that when the time is that others aren't doing it, he is doing it, then you understand that those players increase the probability of them doing it at the right time.
Wow, there it is.
And when you go to seek an employee, you're going to have to make sure that his commitment to what you're doing and how you're doing it is equal to yours. Otherwise, the relationship most likely won't work out.
Wow, that's perfect advice. Thank you, Scott. Passion, always the common denominator. Passion,
Yeah,
baby.
Scott, let me follow that up with this question, Scott. Stanga here, I mentioned he's our resident golfer. He does a lot of his business on the golf course because he's really good. And that's kind of his pressure test to kind of find out a little bit about people. I've heard other executives talk about taking people out to breakfast. Is there a Boras Corporation passion test that you put anybody through so our listeners can maybe start training?
Yeah, we put them in a dark room, and we move the light switch box around, and then we wire them so that we can study their acetylcholine response to fear. No, seriously.
I'm incorporating that.
Yeah. We get these questions a lot, so I make light of them.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
No,
Let me peel it back then, Scott. Is there one thing in particular that you do, not the corporation, that Scott Boras does? Let's say for your main core team, is there something that just you look for that is a must-have?
That is that the commitment level required in the job is one of a fiduciary, where the interest of the athlete is superior to theirs or mine.
Oh,
and when you have to make sure you measure that in an interview and understand it, because there are so many sacrifices that have to come in this job, and not making it home on Christmas Eve is tough.
Right.
It's really difficult.
Right.
And I've had to do that twice, and I hope I never have to do it again. But I do know this, that if I wasn't where I needed to be with our client, the outcome would have been different.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that they understand the commitment level required, because there is, in my mind, when you're going and meeting these young men when they're 18 or 20 or 21, and you're making this commitment, I have 140 people that work for me, and that all of them have to understand that they are, in effect, on call. You are the OBGYN of a player's life, and when
24/7, yes sir.
When that delivery needs to happen, there is no question that someone has to be there. Someone has to provide that representation need. I run our office through a concept of being a lawyer, and not agents don't have legal educations, they don't have licenses, and they don't have ethics courses. And when they talk about what you do and how you treat your client. And so for those reasons, I think it's very clear after an interview that with me that everyone knows. Let's put it that way.
I get that feeling too, Scott. I get that feeling. Thank you.
Sometimes work does come first, and Scott, we close every interview out with a quick hitter segment where I kind of ask you a series of questions around a specific theme, and you just let me know what comes to mind right off the bat. And for this one, I want my all-time favorite quote from you came earlier this year during the negotiations between MLB owners and the players over the structure of this COVID-shortened season. And MLB signed a $1 billion TBS deal for baseball's postseason, and you called that contract the rectal thermometer to illustrate that baseball owners crying poor during this pandemic shouldn't be trusted. And, that was just an amazing metaphor, and I kind of want to stick with that, a temperature theme here. So I'm just going to give you some quick topics and let me know if they're cold, lukewarm, or on fire. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. Let's start with podcasting. You know, podcasts have exploded and it's been magnified during the pandemic. How do you feel about podcasts in their future? Are you cold on it, lukewarm, or would you say they're on fire?
Well, with the number of requests we've gotten in our office, I would say that the system is on fire for content, no doubt about that. And the benefit for us is, like, you know, I get to sit down with a group of guys that, you know, and you kind of get to talk about you get 60 media calls a week, and what they're often talking about specific subject matter that relates to your clients or team, or, you know, or their decision making. These allow more for a human interaction with people, and you kind of get to know the journalists involved, and it's more of a personal forum. So I think the platform is a really good one, because I think the viewers get more than topical information. They get more of an understanding of the authorship and who the person is that's speaking.
That's perfect, because, you know, that was our goal in this interview, is to get, you know, a little more personal with you. And here it comes, because you're an OC icon, and we have the Real Housewives of Orange County down here. And so inquiring minds want to know if Scott Boras is an RHOC watcher on Bravo. Are you cold, lukewarm, or on fire over the Real Housewives of Orange County?
Well, the truth of the matter is, I don't watch the show, but I know who they are because I go to the restaurants where they eat. So I see them all the time. So I don't interact with them or anything, but I know a couple of them. Yeah.
You know, that's Stang and I see them at Gulfstream. Sometimes we go get the salmon for lunch there at Gulfstream, and we'll run into them too. So totally get that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's go a little closer to us. One of your clients, Spencer Torkelson. You know, this is a softball question, because
yeah.
I already know your answer, but we're Arizona State guys, so I had to get this in because he just turned 21. He has the world in his hands. We watched him hit bomb after bomb in Arizona the last few years. Is he the next Mike Trout? He kind of reminds me a little of one of your former clients, Matt Holliday. Are you cold, lukewarm, or on fire over Spencer Torkelson?
I'm not sure that we would talk about meteoric hot. Let me add that to your list.
Yes.
And so he is a hitter that has what I call touch power. He has the ability to hit 300, and yet when he touches a baseball and makes contact, the ball goes out of the ballpark.
Right.
So it's rare that a guy can hit for power and hit for average at that level. And for me, the most performance standard you'd look at of a player that he could replicate a decade of would be Albert Pujols, because Albert Pujols had touch power, where he could hit for average and still get 40 home runs and hit 300, which is a rare ability in the game.
Love that.
Is that a trademarked thing, Scott, that you just said to us? Touch power. Is that a Boras Corporation trademark yet?
That is that is part
Beautiful.
of. We have our own language in the office, so forgive me for speaking.
No, we love it.
I'm gonna steal it.
Okay, good.
All right. And just to wrap it up here, because we talked a little about real estate, and Stanga's an agent here. The Orange County real estate market, Stanga says it's been on fire lately. Are you cold, lukewarm, or on fire over that?
Fortunate for all of us in COVID who've suffered the detriment of we make our living off players and players don't play, and yet we have overhead. But certainly the real estate world has been very kind to us in many ways, no doubt. So
yes, sir.
As I had mentioned to Mark, is that the certain areas, or every player we've had that has invested in real estate has always done better when they've sold the home and went back to their original homes.
Right.
Good.
All right, Scott. Well, yeah, thanks again. We just want to thank you for taking the time out to join us, and a great interview. We appreciate your time.
Really a pleasure, and thanks for thinking of us, and appreciate all you do to advance baseball.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.